Do a review on Likutei Sichos in Chayei, volume 25. This is the first Sicha for the portion of Chayei Sara. In this Sicha, the Rebbe points out that the most renowned purchase of part of Israel, while all of Israel was given to the Jewish people, but Hebron is singled out in the Psukim, and that's most known, not even challenges from the Goyim. Question is, why Hebron? And the Rebbe associates it with Hebron because Hebron was given over to the Levim. And the Rebbe explains that the connection for Yidden to Hebron, to the Levim, in a way, is stronger than the connection for Yidden to other parts of Eretz Yisrael. And that's why Hebron is the first and the beginning which correspond. But this requires a whole pilpul. The Rebbe goes into the whole explanation. Is it taka the case that Hebron is stronger? Are there two opinions about this? And exactly what the status of Hebron is. The Rebbe makes a difference, a distinction, because we know that the Orei Miklot, Hebron was one of the Orei Miklot, that was given to the Levim. And then on top of that, the Levim had other 42 cities. The Rebbe will bring out that the connection to the land of Eretz Yisrael in Hebron, or the six Orei Miklot, is even stronger than the connection of the other 42 cities that were given to them. The Rebbe goes through a whole big arichas to explain that the ownership in Hebron to the Levim was a personal ownership, in which the ownership of the Levim of the other 42 cities that were given to them is just that they belong to the general tribe. There's a difference that in the Orei Miklot you don't have to pay even rent because of the connection. Why is that? The Rebbe seems like maybe they don't own it so much. The Rebbe is going to go through a lot of details, explaining us in the laws and the connection between the tribe of Levi and Hebron. We'll go step by step. We're learning the Sichel Ilu Nishmas Rav Levi Yitzchok. Tehei Nishmas Yitzruri B'Tzrei Chayei. Chayei Sara Aleph. So first the Rebbe brings out how Hebron is spelled out and is uniquely, firstly, connected to the Jewish people. Der erster Ort von Eretz Yisrael, the first place of Eretz Yisrael, was sein Beiles is bepoil übergegangen zu Avraham Avinu, whose ownership, literally, in actuality, has transferred to Avram, our father, to Avram Avinu. There are other places in Eretz Yisrael, all of Eretz Yisrael Hashem gave to the Yidden, but that has not yet materialized in the beginning. The first materialized transfer from the other nations to Avram Avinu, to the Yidden, is the Moras HaMachpelah, is those given in Hebron. So that was in Hebron. And Hebron was this day HaMachpelah Pnei Mamre Hi Hebron. That was the field with the double cave that was facing Mamre, which Mamre is Hebron. So that means we see in the pasuk that Hebron was purchased as a lot from the Mamre. Neches purchased it as a lot for the burial. So that's the first acquisition and the first practical purchase that actually took place was Hebron. or the Moras Machpelah, which was Al Pnei Mamre Hicham. And the Rebbe emphasizes that we're talking about practical. The promise for all of Eretz Yisrael to be given to the Yid, comes before. Afal Pi, although, as shown freer, already earlier, Bebris Ben Absorim, in the Parsha, when this talks about the covenant with Avram Avinu amongst the pieces, is Eretz Yisrael kula abgegeben geworden zu Avram Avinu lezarei Achrov. So the entire Eretz Yisrael has been given over to our father Avram and to his seed that follow. K'moshe Nemar, as the pasuk says, lezarachon asati es haaretz hazois. I've given this land to your seed. That was by the Bris Ben Absalom, and even actually was before, unoch frier, and even before, hat ihm der Eberster gesagt, the Eberster told Avram, Kum halach ba'aretz la'arko v'lerachbo kiluchot lanu. Get up, walk the land to its length and its width, because I'm going to give it to you. So already the Eberster promised him to give him Eretz Yisrael much earlier. However, the Bailus, that ownership, undur hakinyan, and also through making a kinyan bepoil, bepirsum, and also publicly, so the actual ownership through an acquisition, a kinyan, actually, and with publicity, the pasuk says this was done in front of the eyes of all the people of Chayei, all those that come into the city, Shar Ire, is given erst by the Moras Machpelah Shebechevra. So this was first. When did this take place in actuality? This whole public transfer of land to Avraham Avinu, that was the Moras Machpelah, which is in Chevron, which means Chevron is the first area which was publicly, through an acquisition, transferred to Avraham Avinu. Von damals on, and from then on, from that point on, but like the Moras Machpelah Shebechevron, the Moras Machpelah, which is in Chevron, belongs to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Uzaram Achareim, to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and to the seed that follow them, which is Zum Am B'nai Yisrael. Belongs to the Jewish people from that acquisition. Wie steht in Medrash, B'negei the Moras Machpelah, as the Medrash states in regards to the Moras Machpelah, these are one of three places within Eretz Yisrael in which the nations of the world cannot tease, cannot tell the Yidden, to tell them, you stole it. Because they were all bought. This was the purchase of Avram Avinu. Beis Hamikdash by David, we had read that he bought it from Arvoina and Bekesef Malay. By Shechem, it says the Kachti by Yad Ameri Bekashti Becharbi Bekashti. This was already taken by as a burial place for Yosef, and he says to him, as Rashi says over there, that he gave, Yaakov gave to Yosef the extra because he troubled himself with burying, taking Yaakov to the Moras Machpelah. So he gave him Shechem, and that's also one of the places in which the nations have no complaint. They cannot start and tase the Yidden and say to them that they've taken things that don't belong to them, the Gzulu Hem Biyotchem. Das heißt, as the Meiles von Eden bepoil, of Eretz Yisrael, the actual ownership of Yidden over Eretz Yisrael, hat sich angefangen damit, was Avram Avinu hat gekauft Moras Machpelah. It started, where did the ownership of the Yidden start? When Avram Avinu bought Moras Machpelah, the Moras Machpelah, Likutei Sara, to bury Sara. This was the beginning. And because this was the beginning, we have to say that there's some sort of a connection, a special connection. That's why it started. We state in Even Ezra, but the Even Ezra says, Ados is einer from the time in was nis kira zois haparsha. This is one of the reasons why this whole story of the Moras Machpelah has been recorded, is Lakayim Devar Havaya LaAvram Liyas Loi Nachlo. That is to fulfill what Hashem promises to Avram, that this is going to be an inheritance. So the portion of Chayei Sara shows that that inheritance is starting to take place by the purchase of Moras Machpelah Hebron. So the fact that it's about Hebron tells us that we have to find a connection between Hebron with Eretz Yisrael, especially. That was the beginning. Alle Inyonim, welche seine verbunden mit Torah, all matters which are associated with Torah, seine betachlis hadiyuk, are totally precise. Is move on, it's understood. Ados was the erste Nachla von Eden in Eretz Yisrael is in Hebron. The fact that the first inheritance of the Eden in Eretz Yisrael is Hebron, is das verbunden mit Ninyan Meyuchad was Hebron vermocht. So that's associated with that special, unique idea that is only by Hebron, which Hebron owns, which means Hebron has something special, and that's why it starts with that. Und yesh lemer. So the Rebbe says that this connection is not just at the one time when it took place, but it's a lasting connection that we can see later on as well. Yesh lemer, v'bal das mit Hebron, hat sich eingegeben the Beiles von Eden of Eretz Yisrael, that this has started the ownership of Eden of Yisrael with Hebron. The Rebbe kommt out the Beiles of Ir. That's why this ownership comes bepirsum, in publicity, le'enei umas ha'olam, in the eyes of the nations of the world, that took place as Abram purchased it, le'enei b'nei ches. But golu oichin anderes man. This is also in other times you can still see there's some special relationship and connection between Hebron and the Yidden, that it belongs to the Yidden. And the Rebbe brings down now a medrash that the Rebbe says that in that medrash it discusses how different transformation of the city of Hebron, and eventually it ended up going to the Levium. And the Rebbe will explain later on that the Levium have a special connection, as we'll continue to see in the Sikha. But first, the Rebbe brings down the Medrash, to explain the saying of the Medrash in our Parsha. As einer von the Taimim, was Hebron wird angerufen Kiryas Arba. One of the reasons that Hebron is called the Kirya of four. So it says that it went through four different ownerships. It's Kiryas Arba. One of the reasons, because that came up in the Karnasim, the Gerol, the lottery, it ended up, which is the Matas Kahuna, the Taichis Karnasim in Gerolas, Shel Daled of the four. Mitchila the Yehuda. First, it went to the general tribe of Yehuda. That it says that the Eibishter gave, said that when he went to Hebron, Kaleb ben Yefuna, who was the Nasi of Hebron, who went, Yeshua and Kalev that went to spy the land, the Eibishter gave eventually, the Eibishter said that he's going to give Chevron to Kalev. But Kalev was the Nasi of the tribe of Yehuda. So it says that in the beginning, the Eibishter gave it to Yehuda, to the general, to the shepherd. Then it went over. The Rebbe will explain it at the end very well, this precise shyness in the Medrash. Then it went over to Kolev. And then after that, it went to Kohanim. It went to the Kohanim. And then eventually went to the Levim, because you gave the Orei Miklot, which Chevron was one of them, went to the Levim, went to the Kohanim, and went to the Levim. So the Rebbe questions, why is it unique and special to tell us that it had four ownership? What difference does it make on the Milo? What's the advantage in them? Was Chevron had Dalet Bailim that it had four owners? Yeah. The Rebbe will bring out that this represents from a general ownership to a very specific ownership for Chevron, as the Rebbe will bring out. Nor yesh loymar, the Rebbe says that der mitwerter rausgebrachte Inyan miyuchad benigeya, the Bailis von Eden of Chevron. This brings out something unique, that the Yidden have an ownership over Chevron, Kidlek Hamon. There is an advantage because it's a city of the Levim, and it's an advantage within the Levim that it's Chevron. As the Rebbe will say, the city of a Levi has certain advantages, has more ownership, and then it has also more, and it goes through the fact that first it owned in a general way, and then it comes down specific. But we'll have to wait for all these details as the Rebbe continues to develop this idea. First, the Rebbe will bring out that there is a special connection, the lands of the Levim, there's a special connection because it is one of the Orei Miklot, and that makes it special with regards to sales, as the Rebbe will continue to explain. So in our space, the Rebbe is going to explain that we find in Yeshua that Hebron was one of the cities of refuge. And we know that the cities of refuge, the 6 cities of refuge, were given to the Levim. And we find that the ownership of the Levim of Hebron is more than the ownership of all Yidden in the rest of Eretz Yisrael, because there is a halacha that when you sell a house in a walled city, so then the din is that if you don't redeem it within the year of sale, then it's a done deal. When it comes Yovel, it doesn't return. If it's another field, not in a Beis Orechaima, not in a walled city, then it goes back. But a Beis Orechaima, if it has a wall, then it sort of stays. You have a year to redeem it. If the year passes, then it stays. Or there's also the fields. The din is that you can't redeem it when you sell a field. You cannot redeem it. 2 years has to be the sale. That's a field meant for growth. It has to be at least for 2 years. But it's different with the cities of the Orei Miklot. Over there, you can always redeem it. It doesn't go away totally when even if you didn't redeem it within the year. you still get it back. That means that your connection to the land of the Leviim is stronger than all of Eretz Yisrael. And then the Rebbe will say, but on the other hand, we find that it's not as strong. But let's go step by step. This is a whole pilpul over here. And we have to halt and cup over here where the Rebbe is going to bring in the different ideas. So it seemed like we could have said, as eine von die Meiles in der Beiles von Eden is that one of the advantages on the ownership that the Yidden own Hebron is was Hebron is eine von the Ori Miklot. Hebron is one of the cities of refuge. So that means that Hebron gets the halachas of the laws of Ori Miklot. This is merumas over Parsha Senu. The Ragachover hints and says in our Parsha that it is part of the Orei Miklot. He explains the debate between Abraham and the Ephraim, in which Abraham wanted to buy the field. He says, "B'ksei sodehu," and what was the response of Ephraim? That no, nosiato b'sechenu. He explains that Abraham was concerned. The din is when you have an Orei Miklot, the burial has to be outside of the city. Cannot be within the city. It has to be outside of the city. So Abraham was concerned he's going to bury Sara here. And then they're going to make it into an Orei Miklot. And then they're going to have to move Sarah's body to the outside of the city because you're not allowed to have a burial place in the Orei Miklot cities. And what was the response of the Ephraim? He said, Nesi Elikim, you don't have to worry because you're a prince. And the halacha is that the grave of a king and a nasi, you don't move even when there's an Orei Miklot. So he was trying to tell them it will still stay. You don't have to worry. But yet we see from this whole debate, as the Ragachover explains, it was all about the halachas of Orei Miklot that apply to it. And since it applies to the laws of Orei Miklot, and we know that the Orei Miklot were given to the Levim, so therefore the laws that applies to the cities of the Levim should apply over here, all the cities. So we just have to remember the 6 Orei Miklot belong to the Levim, and we also gave them the additional 42 cities, so a total of 48 cities belong to them. But the halacha that we say with regards to the Levim in all their cities should apply also to the Orei Miklot. We'll see, this is going to be some of the debate. But first, the Rebbe is just establishing the fact that Hebron is one of the Orei Miklot that is in Yehoshua. That's also the explanation, according to the Ragachover, in the debate between Avram and Ephraim. This is also hinted in our parsha that this is an Orei Miklot city, the place that Abraham bought by the Amoras Machpelah at Hebron. Loit the Ragachover is masbir, according to what the Ragachover explains, the shakla v'tariya zwischen Avram u'bnei Ches, the give and take that took place between Avram and the sons of Ches. As Abraham had gewollt kaufen the Ma'ora davke b'ktzei sadeh. Abraham wanted to purchase the cave, only the one that was at the edge of the field. Why? Explains the Ragachover. While Beis HaKvoros shel Orei Miklot davke chutz li'ir. The Beis HaKvoros of a city of refuge has to be outside of the city. So therefore, what was Avram wanting to be in the edge of the city and down outside of the city? So Avram was worried that if Sarah will be buried somewhere not at the edge, they'll have to remove the kever in order to move it out of the cities of refuge once Hebron becomes a city of refuge. So he said, I want it at the edge, so it shouldn't be in the city. Aber the Bnei Ches have geantwortet, but the Bnei Ches answered him, Nisi Elikim, Ato B'Sechenu. You are a prince of a godly prince, going with Unkever Melech v'Nasi Befanim, and the grave of a king and a Nasi, you don't move, so you don't have anything to be concerned. He was saying to them, you don't need to have it because we're not going to move it, even if it turns in eventually into a city of refuge. You're not going to touch Sara's grave because a grave of a Melech and a Nasi, you don't move. So we're not going to move it. So, but nevertheless, just to show that this Hebron, the Maoris Machpelah, this had to do with a city that is eventually going to be part of the Arei Miklot. Now, Arei Miklot were from the cities that were given to the Levim. Was the Arei Miklot hat man abgegeben to the Levim. The cities of refuge, they were given to the Levim. Und in der Beilus von Levim, I've said the Arim. So now, this is, since it belongs to the Levi, and the Levi's got some other lands as well, the outside of the land, Migrashei Ha'orim, that came from all the Yiddish and territories they gave, they had to separate and give outside of their areas to the Levim. So the ownership, so they gave it away to the Levim, and the general, we find the ownership of the Levim on their cities, you find that it has an advantage. When if the Bailus and Levim, if they Orim gefindt man a Meile, you find an advantage, legabe the Bailus von Eden of Zeder Nachlis, when you measure it relative to the ownership from the Yidden on their inheritance, on the Nachlas, the rest of Eretz Yisrael. And maybe that's why we're getting at, maybe that's why we find in the Torah specifically about Hebron, because it has a very strong ownership, because it has the ownership of the Levi. How do we see a Levi has a stronger ownership than a Yid in the regular? Viderdin, as the halachis. As oib the Levi mochru sodem mizdei oreim. If they sell a field from the fields of their cities, those are the fields that were given to the Levim. Oy bayis mibote oirechaim shalahem. Or they sell a home from a house which is in a surrounded city from the time of Yeshua. It has a wall. So the halacha is as ein goyalim kiseider hazeh. They do not have the redemption rules in the order the way we redeem it by regular Yid. Vishar b'nei Yisrael, as by other Yid. They have a stronger connection to the land. What is the din by other Yidden? Bosasode kemen nit poide zayin ad shtei shonim. First off, if you sell a field anywhere else in Eretz Yisrael, not that belongs to the Levim, you cannot redeem it. The sale must be at least 2 years. After 2 years, you can buy it back. You redeem it by buying it back. That's what. Unbote orichaima. And the din is by houses that are in a walled city, im loigolo b'toich hashono, is das nechlat b'yovel. If you don't redeem it within the first year that you sold a house in this walled city, then it is complete. Even Yovel doesn't bring it back. Like this, everything goes back by Yovel. But this is totaled, and by Yovel, it's finished. Even when Yovel comes. So what is the din by a field or a house in a Chayei from the Levim? Elamoicherin hasodes, they can sell their fields. Vafilu somuch liyovel, even very close to the yovel. and they can immediately redeem it, meaning they don't give up their rights to be able to redeem it. V'im hegdishay soda, and if they made a field hegdish, they consecrated a field. Goylim yada hegdish la'achar hayevel. They can redeem from hegdish after the yevel. Hegdish did not possess it, does not get the ownership, even though its yevel has passed, unlike by all other places, not the Levim's fields. And further, v'goyelim botei orechime kol zman sheyirsu, and they can redeem the houses that are in a walled city for any time they want, afilu achar kama shonim, even after many years, even not 1 year, but 2 years, but many years, doesn't matter. Shenemar gu'ulas oilim tiyeh lelevim, that for the Levim there should be an eternal redemption. They can always redeem it. So that means that they can't really, they're possessing the land stronger. But those vice lich eure, that seems to point, azir bailus is ashtandike, that their ownership is constant. You can't take it away, unlike in other places. Here you can't take it away. Oich ven bepoil is their bias or their disode b'shus hekdesh or their b'shus achan. Even when in reality the house is in the house or the field is in the domain of hekdesh, or somebody else has it, they still have an ownership because they have a right to always redeem it. As it's not totaled, taken away from them, even though they sold it, even though they didn't redeem it. It doesn't really, they still have their rights. So that means that their connection to their land, to their houses, to their fields is much stronger than the others. So if we should sum this up, that Hebron is a city of the Levim, and the Levim have more connection to their land, so then it turns out that Hebron has a stronger connection to the Eretz Yisrael, to the owners of it. Kum to ois, as the Bailis, the Hebron, that the ownership of Hebron als eine von the Ore Miklot was gehört zum Levim, because that should be included, one of the Ore Miklot that belonged to Levim. The din that we're saying, the connection from the Levim, that they can always redeem it, is by all fields, but the assumption right now is that should apply to the Ore Miklot that were given to the Levim as well. So it turns out that Hebron, which is part of the Ore Miklot, given to the Levim, als eine von der Ore Miklot was gehört to the Levim, it's one of the cities of refuge that belong to the Levim. In an Eifun, gehört zu Levim, in an Eifun for Gulas Olam, it belongs to them for eternal, for that and the and so this halacha sort of tells us that the Levim have a very strong connection to the land, that it's always theirs. It's not taken away. It's never completely removed from them. Okay, that's the way it seems from this halacha. But the Rebbe says there's another halacha the Rebbe brings down, which actually is associated with the cities of the Levim, that it almost seems like that their cities were not given as a possession. The rest of Eretz Yisrael become a nachla, become the achuza of the Yidden. It seems like the cities of the Levim were not given really as a possession. It's just to live there, but they don't really own it. That would mean a lesser degree of connection. Rebbe brings down. But if just because of this, Was Chevron is an Ir Miklot, was is abgegeben geworden zu Levim, which means that Chevron, being a city of refuge, is given to the Levim, and something that was given to the Levim has special halachas with regard to redemption, points to its special connection. But the Rebbe says there's another halacha. Is l'chayre farkert. If the connection of Chevron because of Levi and then it's not just Chevron, it's not just Ori Mikla, it's just because it's Levi, in the special halacha Levi, we find the opposite halacha with regards to Levi. Is l'chayre farkert. So it would seem just the opposite. Warum man gefindt as the Bailus von the Levim of Zeda Orim, because we find that the ownership of the Levites of their cities is schwacher with the Bailus von andere Shvatim of Zeir Nachlo. It's weaker than the ownership of the other Shvatim on their inheritance. That there's a lesser connection for the Levim to the land than is the other Yidden, according to the following halacha. The din is, the halacha is, as kol shevet Levi muzhorim shelo yinchalu be'eretz Canaan. The entire tribe of Levi had been warned. The pasuk says, le'yil shevet Levi nachlo shelo yinchalu be'eretz Canaan. They should not inherit in the land of Canaan, meaning that Levi has no lachna. Zehobanit ke nachla in Eretz Yisrael. They have no inheritance in Eretz Yisrael. What about the cities that they were given? The fact that they got the 48 cities, the 48 get 6 orim miklos and 42 cities. 6 orim miklos and aleim titnu arboim b'shtayim iris. The pasuk says on top of the 6 orim miklot, give them another 42 cities. Is das blois kidiuk l'shoyna kosuf, when you see in the pasuk was nanachlo. It's orim lo sheves, so that they can sit there. Not meant for nachlo. Was der fun is mashma. From this it appears as the Levim haben nit kembailus shleim of ere, that they don't have a complete ownership on their cities. It's only to sit there, it's to live there, but they don't own it like a possession, like a nachlo. That's what it seems from this halacha, that they didn't get it from the pasuk, because the pasuk says orim lo sheves, but not something as the Rambam paskins lo yinchalu beretz Canaan. They can't have lo yinachlo, but it's just to sit. That's the look. The Rebbe will change this around in the end of the Sichos, that they don't have a personal ownership, but the Levi has. We'll see. Steht in Yerushalmi. So the Rebbe says now that this is not actually so clear, that according to Yerushalmi, this is actually a disagreement whether the Levim have a nachala, whether they have an inheritance, or they just live there. And when you bring the Maestros, then there's the vidui. The vidui you say, Allah Ores Asher Nosatalon. You're thanking the Eibishter for the field that He's given you. The question is, did the Eibishter give it to the Levim? Do the Levim, when they give Maestros, do they say Asher Nosatalonu if they don't have a nachla there? So there's a machlokes. And the Yerushalmi says that the two opinions, whether you say it or not, depends on whether we look as their part of Eretz Yisrael as an inheritance, or we just look that they live there, like it's mashma from the pasuk. Steht in Yerushalmi, Ados is the plukta from Tanoim. This is the disagreement of the Tanoim. Rameir says, as kohanim v'levim seine nit mizvade. they do not do the confession. What's the confession? The confession is the vidui maestris. When you bring the maestris, you say that the Eibishter is giving. They don't say vidui. Why? The Balshale not lochelik ba'aretz. They didn't take a part in the land. So what are they going to say? The land that nosat alonu. They didn't give it to them. Or Rabbi Yosef sagt, yesh lehem orei migrash. What I mean, they do have orei migrash. So the Rishalmi explains, so what is the machlokes? What's the status of these cities that the Leviim get? Did they get those cities just to live there? So it's not Nasat alone, it's not an Achla. That's why the mayor holds that you cannot be mizvade because it's not your nachlo. As the mayor halt, the mayors of the view, the base diron nitnu, it was given just to live there. It's not that it's going to be their inheritance and their hold that they have a partner. And Rabbi Yossi, on the other hand, halt. The machlokes nitnu, that was given to divide the distribution. As the orim nitnu l'halevim l'chelko v'lachuzosam, that was given to them, as the Pnei Moshe says, as their inheritance, as their hold. This is part of their land. Kumtois. So it turns out, as l'das Rabbi Yossi, so belangin the orim migrosh, so the levim al zeir chelik ba'aretz, so that the orim migrosh do belong to them as their part in Eretz Yisrael. Unazoi paskent the Rambam, and that's the Rambam. Schoch by vidu hoimer ves hadom asher nosat alon. Even though you have to say when you confess the land that you gave me from deswegen seine levim misvadim. Still, they are confessing. She'afa pishlenot l'chelik ba'aretz. Yesh l'morei migdash. Even though they didn't take a part in the other land, says the Rambam, they have the orei migdash. That man. As the Orei Migrosh Hasten Chelik Halavim and Eretz Yisrael. So the Rambam does believe that they are a part of the portion of the Levim and Eretz Yisrael. So this points to the fact that the Rambam himself will, if it goes like the Yerushalmi, will rule like Rabbi Yossi, that this is a Chelik and an Achla. That's why they can say Asher Nasat Lonu, and they have a part too. So then we don't have such a problem that they don't have an achla, because we go like the opinion that they do have an achla, as the Rebbe will continue to explain further on. So while from this halacha in the Rambam, we see that the Rambam paskins that the Levim do have their portion as an inheritance, and that's why they can be misvade. So the Rebbe says, but l'chayre, we find another ruling of the Rambam, which seems to say that they don't really have an ownership, because the is a question whether a Reitzeach who runs away to the Orei Miklot and he lives in the Orei Miklot, does he have to pay rent? And we wanted to connect this. If the property is owned by the Levim, they have to pay rent, but the halacha is that you don't have to pay rent. So in the Orei Miklot, so it almost seems, why don't you have to pay rent? So let's look inside. The Rambam paskent, even though the Rambam rules. A murderer who lives in the cities of refuge does not give the payment, does not pay rent. But one who lives in the other cities of the Levim, not the Orei Miklot, the other 42, would have to pay schar lebal habayis. But L'das Yerushalmi, according to the opinion of the Yerushalmi, that is the machlokes So this agreement, whether they would have to pay rent to the Levim, is totally, it hinges in the Plukta now, in the above disagreement between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda we had before, whether limach loikes nitnu, whether the uh, cities of the Levim were given as a distribution part of their part in Eretz Yisrael, or the Levites didn't, or they were just given for them to live there. So was der funis mashma. So from that, it appears as the ore mikrosh v'chabalangen to the Levim, that these cities of were the outside of the cities of the other Yidden, and we've given them to the Yidden and thus Lidas Rambam Belois Men Bezir. So there would be a distinction, it would be only those 42 cities. Since we say that in the Ore Miklot you don't have to pay rent, so we're making here a distinction between the cities of the Levim outside of the Ore Miklot, the 42 cities, and the 6 cities of the Ore Miklot, because in the Ore Miklot they don't have to pay rent, but they do have to pay rent in the other cities of the Levim. And so Hebron is the Chanare Miklat. So it turns out that it's just the opposite. So of a Nidishesh Ore Miklot, not the 6 cities of refuge, Bos Huvdulu Lemiklot. They have been separated to be refuge. And if they're refuge, you don't pay rewarded. Und der Fahr seinen See Koilet, Ben Ledas, Ben Shaloi Ledas, which means there is a level of miklot in the other cities of refuge. Besides those 6 official refuge, they are koilet bein ledas beshaloi ledas. Gemara in Makis says that there's a distinction between the Ore Miklot, the 6 Ore Miklot, and all the other cities of the Levim, which are also koiled. But the difference is that in the Sharm, in the Ore Miklot is Bein Ladas, Bein Shalei Ladas, whether he had in mind to save his life or not to save his life. That cities of refuge are koiled. But in the Shar Ore Levim, is only refuge over there if he goes there in order to seek refuge, but not Shaloi Ledas, if he just happened to be there, and that would not provide that protection for him. So it turns out that if we learn, like we explained the Rambam says that there's a difference between the Ore HaLevim and the Ore Miklot with regards to payment. And we're saying that the reason is because the Ore Miklot are not given for they're designated for Miklot, and therefore they don't really belong to the Levim. So that would go against the point we're trying to say that Hebron, which is what we're talking, which is an Ore Miklot, is really belongs when we're seeing that that Ore Miklot do not really belong to the Levim, because he doesn't even have to pay rent. The person who lives there, the Ritzach who lives there, doesn't have to pay rent over there, because that means because the Levi doesn't really own it. So we're trying to say that because the Ore Miklot is part of all the Ore HaLevim have a special connection. But here the Rebbe points out from this halacha from the Rambam, it almost seems like all other Levim, cities of Levim, yes, over there it belongs to the Levim, and therefore it's a special connection. not a lesser connection. But when it comes specifically to the Ori Miklot of the Levim, the six Ori Miklot, they seem to not require the rent. And if they don't require the rent, according to the Yerushalmi, it's because they don't really have ownership. But the Rebbe says that that's not really the view of the Babali. In the Babali is mashma, the reason you don't pay the rent, it's not because the Levim don't own it. Because the Rebbe pointed out that the Levim do have a nachla because the Rambam holds that you're misvade for Meiser Sheni. But now you want to make a distinction, maybe only Levim's other cities are not the Ore Miklot. But the Rebbe says no, that according to the Bavli, also the Ore Miklot have a specific connection uh, to the ownership of the Levi. As a matter of fact, the Rebbe would bring it even more by the Ori Miklot, the connection with Levi, as the Rebbe continues. Aber ledas habavli is not mashma so. It's not mashma so that the reason why you don't pay rent for the Retzeach, for the Ori Miklot, is because it doesn't really belong to them. That's not the reason. It's because there's a posik specific exemption. But from Bavli Kumtois, because it turns out from the Bavli, those was are Ritzeich darf nicht mal sein Schar zum Levi in the Sheish or the Miklot. The reason why the murderer does not need to pay rent to Levi in the Sheish or the Miklot in the six cities of refuge is not weil es felt in der Bailus from the Levim. That's not because there is something lacking in the ownership of the Levim of the Shtet in these six cities that they're not full owners. Again, that would go against the whole base we're trying to point that they do have a stronger connection to the cities of Lviv. But the Rebbe says the fact that they don't pay rent and the Rambam rules they don't pay rent is not because they don't have such a connection to the cities and they don't own it, so you don't have to pay them rent. Nor does is adin miyuchat. It's a special aloche that you don't pay rent for the Gemara is zogt as well. Let them talk from posuk b'hoy lochem haorim the miklot. It says there should be these to be to you these cities for refuge. Lochem means for all your needs. If you need to live, it should be there for your needs. So the pasuk gives it away to you, not because the Levi doesn't own it, but the pasuk is given to you. The fact that Rambam doesn't, from this language that the Rambam uses as the bailus from the Levim of the Ore Miklot to Shar Ore Halavim haben them all together. That the ownership of the Levim on the cities of refuge and on the other cities of the Levim are the same definition. We're not going to make a chiluk and say, well, they own the others, but the cities of refuge they don't own. Because the Rambam writes that Kvar Nitztavu Yisrael Litin Lohem Orim Lo Sheves, that they were already told to give them cities to sit, Umigrashehem V'Ha'orim, and these lots and the cities, Hem Sheish Orei Miklot, are the six Orei Miklot, V'Aleim Shtayim Arba'ir, and on top of them the 42 cities. Says the Rambam, Mei HaMashiach, but we'll add additional Ori Miklot when Mashiach come. HaKoy LeLevim, they'll give to Levim. Because the fun is mashma. From this, it bunches them all together. It doesn't make no distinction. As in Zer Shayches Levim haben sie ein Geder, they have one Geder. They're all cities of Levim. So we're not going to start saying that they have a lesser connection to the Sheishor and Miklot. In the Rambam, there's no difference, and it's all connected together. And therefore, why don't you pay rent? The Ritzeach over there is because the Torah said, L'chol tzarchechem, a special pasuk. But the ownership, since the Rambam says that they do say the Vidui Meiser Nasata Lonu, that it belongs to them, that goes like the opinion that they own the land. And the Rebbe is going to go out even further that because we see that there's actually a stronger connection to the Levim, to the Orei Mikla than even everything else, as the Rebbe continues. Even more than this, it's not only that the Levim, cities of the Levim, and the Orei Miklot are really one together. It's not like there is the Levim's own cities and the Orei Miklot they don't own. And we said before, no, that it's really all one thing. These are all cities of Levim as the language of the Rambam. So there's even more than this. That the Orei Miklot is born out of the Orei Halevim. It's not that the Orei Miklot has its separate gather, but the Orei Miklot is because they are cities of Levim and not a separate thing about Orei Miklot. Different. They have the status of all of the others Orei Miklot. The reason that you don't have to pay rent for that is a special pasuk, but not because there is a difference. The Rebbe brings like this: in Gemara, lernt man up from V'samti l'chom mokim goimer. It says a place for you. For you means for Moshe Rabbeinu. But the Orei Miklot, so the Gemara, that the Samti L'cho B'chayecho Mokim B'mkoimcho. I'm going to place L'cho means at your time, even before we're going to make later the official Orei Miklot, the cities, but even B'chayecho in your life, which means during Moshe Rabbeinu's, then they went over to the Evra Yardin, to the Eretz Yisrael after Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. But during your lifetime, there will be a place, Mimkoimcha, Asher Yonu Shomo, that somebody can run away to. Where was that? Melamed Shehoy Yisrael Megalin Bamidbar, that the Yidden would have a place with the exile in the Midbar to cities of refuge, Leichem Megalin. Where were they exiled to? Lamachne Levia. They went to the camp of living. That's l'cha mokum mimkoimcha, place in your place. Shed hey machne levia koiletus. So the machne levia absorbs. Ve'af orei miklot yiyu orei levi. And also the orei miklot later on will be the cities of Levi, just like Levi, machne levia was koiletus. So also the orei miklot will be the cities of Levi. So Rashi explains, so this is from Rashi, that the Machne Levia is koiletz also that the Orei Miklot should be the Orei Levi. From Pirush Rashi is L'chayre Mashma, so from this Rashi, it seems like, it looks like, as those was Orei Miklot seinen koilet, why do they koilet? Is those the farvas is Orei Levia? Because they're cities of Levi, just because they come from the Samtil Chobechayecho, then Af Orei Miklot Orei Levi, because the Klita comes a result of being Orei Levi. And not that there is a separate gather of Orei Miklot. Orei Miklot are because they are Orei Levi. But it's very difficult to say, as Rashi read nor wegen shar orei halvim. When Rashi says af orei miklot yi orei levi, it means the 42 cities which become part of the orei levis, and miklot is something else. The member is orim. It's hard to say that Rashi only means those 42, and not. We're trying to prove the whole time that it's the orei miklot, the chevrin, which is an orei miklot, one of the six orei miklot, is part of the Orei Halavim. So we cannot say, it's very difficult to say that we're talking about only the 42, the Membezorim. Vos lo yhuvdalu lemiklot, they have not really been separated to absorb, to have a person running away, a refuge. Und seine Keule nur der Farbe, so wird sie gegeben zu Levim. And the reason that they are koilet, the das, when you have in mind, is because they were given to the Levim. It's difficult to say that this is what Rashi means, but this Rashi is not talking about the sheish or mikla. That's taka not given to the Levim. Vorum oib azoi. In that case, what Rashi gedacht zogen, va'af orei halevim yu koitlish ukayotzubay. He should say the cities of the Levim should absorb, because we're talking about only not the Sheish Ore Miklot, we're talking about only the other cities. But Pashtus L'Shoin is Af Ore Miklot Yu Ore Levim. So he's saying that the Ore Miklot should be Ore Levim. Is Mashma Zaret B'Ikar Vegin the Sheish Ore Miklot, that mainly he's talking about the 6 cities of refuge. So that means that the 6 cities of refuge, Rashi says, is born out of the fact that the other Levim. So this means those was not gegeben the sheish or miklot to the Levim. This that they gave the 6 cities of refuge to the Levim is as nit as aitiker din hanegel the cities orim. This is not a separate law which is important, which is connected to giving the cities. We have 6 cities, so we gave them 6 cities separately. As Neusef of them was a Zainen or a Miklot, that we say that they first of all, they're or a Miklot. And then we're going to say that is the Adin, as Matav they give to the Levim, that they need to be given to the Levim. So it would mean that they're not really regular cities of the Levim, they're cities of refuge. And therefore they can have a different din and not have the same din as the Levim, which would not work for us. But is the adin nor? But the real pshat is dos is adin in them geder from miklot shel ha'orim. This is a halacha in the definition of the refuge of the cities. Das was a werden, was a seinen, werden ore halevim. The fact that they become the cities of the Levim, tut oif adin klita, tut oif adin klita. So the fact that they are the cities of the Levim, from Rashi says that because they're ole halevim, therefore they become as cities of refuge. It's not that because they're cities of refuge that we give them to the Levim, it's because they're cities of the Levim that they become refuge. And it accomplishes also the Klita. So what's the difference between the 6 cities and the other rest of it? Das heißt, as in the Sheish Orim and Faran Zwegdor. The 6 cities have 2 defined. Aleph ze seinen koilet als Orim Miklot. They are cities of refuge, so that's one. Vasuvdulu Miklot, they have been distinguished, separated to refuge. Umitzadem seine ze koilel, bein ladas, bein shalil ladas. So they would be providing refuge, whether the Ritzeich knows it or doesn't know. But the Lifnei, but even before they were separated as cities of refuge, they also provide refuge. They do provide refuge because they're cities of Levim. Okay, over there you have to be Ladas by all the other cities of Levim. So here we added to being a city of Levim, which provides you refuge, Shaloi Ladas. We added that this is Ladas Shaloi Ladas. So why, why does it have to be also a city of a Levi if it is uh, a city of designed for refuge? So Laman of Kamina, why does Rashi associate it? Because it's Or Levim. Why does it go Levim? So 200 holds 100. If the Ore Miklot are koiled, especially because they're cities of refuge, why would it also need to have the gather of cities of Levi koilel when it's only Ladas, if they're koiled both? So why do we need both? Yes, Lemon Afkim can say a difference in actual practically. Bishvas is felt einer von dit neuen Verscheißer Mittel. Let's say that one of the six doesn't have, in order to be a city of refuge, you still need to have certain condition. You need six. If there's no six, they're not koilet. But there's still a city of Levi, but there still remain a city of Levim. So if the Ritzech has in mind to use it, just like other cities of Levim. So it's not, we can't divide, we can't make the Ore Miklot less than the regular Ore Halavim, Farkeret. They become a Miklot because the Ore Halavim, we're adding to them and that they should be also providing a Miklot Shaloi Ledas, but they still remain the cities of the Levim. If we say by the cities of Levim, going back to before, that they're a nachlo, and that's why they're kabim svade, and say in asata lonu. So that certainly applies to the cities of Miklat as well, because the cities of Miklat are part of the cities of the Levim. It's only adding to it that even shaloi ledas they're going to be koilet. So therefore, you can't make a distinction and say that the cities of the Levim is connected, is an achlo, and the Ore Miklot are not an achlo. They're part of the cities of the Levim. And that makes them later on, and we added and made it to Ore Miklot. Why was the Rambam paskin that you don't have to pay rent in Ore Miklot? That's because of another pasuk of Lachem, as the Rebbe explained before. Und also ist ich Masma von Hemshech HaParshi is in Parshas Maseh. And that's also the way it sounds from the flow of the Parshas and Parshas Maseh. Früher kommt in the Torah the Parsha. First, the Torah writes the portion from V'nosnu Levim Menachlas Achuzosum Orim Losheves. You should give to the Levim from the inheritance which they hold on their inheritance. You give them cities to sit in govern. Besa Orim Ashetitnu Levim, says the Pasuk, and the cities that you should give is a Sheish Ore Amiklot, the 6 cities of refuge, that you give so that the Ritzech can run away, the Ore Miklot, and then you give on top of that another 42 cities. So first we're talking about just giving the Ore Miklot and the Migrash Orim, without talking about the refuge, anything. Später kommt the Parsha, wie Kreisen, Lachem Orim, Ore Miklot, you should make the cities announce that these cities are cities of refuge, the murder can run away, this haste. Eiders is not the din klita bepoiled by the Sheish Orim. For we have the actual law of absorption of refuge by the 6 cities, Tarfas Zayin, Ore Halavim, they need to be cities of Levim. So they're cities of Levim, so you're not going to make a distinction. Whatever the city of Levim, if they're an Achla, the Ore Miklat an Achla too. And the Rebbe is all trying to explain because before they tried to make a distinction. The Rebbe wants to bring out the Ore Miklat has a stronger shaykhs to the Levim, and the Levim's Nachla is even stronger. And the Rebbe challenges from the Halacha L'Cheira, it seems, because the Rambam makes an Afkemina between the Ori Miklot and the other cities of the Levim. And the Rebbe says, no. The Rebbe said the difference is because there's a special pasuk that says that you don't pay rent over there. But this is not. And the Rebbe continues to bring evidence that this is all the cities of refuge. They are first cities of Levim, and then they become cities of refuge. And so it says very clearly in the Chinuch. He explains the reason why does the cities of the Levim, why do they provide refuge? That amongst these cities of the Levim, they had special cities that was a refuge for the murderer. Were special cities for miklat etzech, but in all had a miklat. So he says, "As mipnei goydel ma'alosom from the Levim, because of the great level of the Levim, the koisher polum and the fitting of their activities, the chin erkom and the grace, their value, nifchera adsam, their cities was chosen, likloit kohedig nefesh bishgoga, to absorb, to file refuge for anyone killing accidentally another person. Yeser ma'aratzis shar hashivoti, more than the cities of the other tribes. Ulai techaper olav admosam hamukudeshes b'kedushosam. Perhaps this land of the Levim will atone for them, which is more sanctified with the sanctity from the Levim. So it's all about the Levi. Kumtois. So what does it turn out? As euch the sheish ore miklot hoben dem geder von ore haLevim. That they all have the definition, they're all cities of Levi. With the andere members here, just like the other 42 cities. Was the fun is verstandig, that's understood as euch the sheish ore miklot seinen weggegeben geworden zu their Bibles, that they were also presented to their ownership, just like the Rambam says that they say Nosata Lonu, they're also Nosata Lonu, because the Ore Miklot are cities of Levim. With Sadem, Oir Bakum and the Ore Madiklita, and because they're cities of Levim, and they owned by the Levim, maybe since they're only, they can provide refuge because of the sanctity of the Levim. But the issue, so while in Halacha we're okay, in the Rambam we see that this is take, that it's an ownership by the Levim. And they say Nasat alone is they own it, but we have a problem in the Pasuk. The Pasuk seems to indicate that it's only Losheves, that there's a difference between the Rambam, the Rebbe quoted the Rambam in the beginning, that all the Yidden have a Nachla. Levim have no Nachla, it's only cities to sit there. Hey, Apiko now very schwer, based on the above, it becomes back the difficulty. Since we gave the cities to the Levim, that was their portion. Like the opinion of Rabbi Yossi was Neschale. Their posik as the Orim Zainam Blois Loshev. So why does the posik says they're just to sit there? And the Rebbe makes now a distinction between personal ownership of the Levi or being owned by the tribe of the Levi. And the Rebbe says that when the pasuk said they don't have a nachal law and it's given only Losheves, that's for the individual Levi. But the land itself, the whole part, belongs to the Levi. Yeshlemah the Bir was that. We can say the explanation. Das was the Orim geheren to the Levim is fact that we say that it belongs to Levim is Aleph. Bnei Yisrael, how did they get it? Kol Hashvatim haben sie gegeben me'achuzosam. The Hashvatim, they had their inheritance, their hold, their nachla that they got, and they contributed to the Levi. Und der Fall findet man Ashini Ikru, which makes, we find something very distinct. All the portions of the tribes were together in one place, but the Levi got from every tribe, so they were all scattered all over. And the Fall findet man Ashini Ikru was the Memches Ir seine gewähnt mit Fusur benachlas Kama v'Kama, that the 48 cities have been scattered amongst the inheritance for different, several of the Shvatim. Noch mer kol Shvatim, it was scattered amongst all tribes. Beis, and number two, so number one, this came from the Yidden given to the Levim. And number two, as is a bailus klolus from klolus Hashem. It's a general ownership, the tribe owns it. You gave the 48 cities to the tribe of Levi. All of the 48 cities. Levi proti, but each individual Levi, he doesn't have an individual ownership. He doesn't personally own it, his home. As ein Norif Lesheves is only to live there. So it is a nachla, but not his personal home, not his personal. But thus is einer from the biyudin in them. And that explains, one of the explanations was the Seder with the Orims and Oinkum to the Levim is given. So how did they get it? V'nosnu b'nei Yisrael l'Levim and achlas achazosim Orim l'Shabbos. That the Bnei Yisrael gave to the Levim from their inheritance cities to cities. Thus is geworden nachlas achazosim from the Bnei Yisrael. First, it became their inheritance. Und die Bnei Yisrael haben gegeben the Orim to the Levim. And they gave it to the Levim. So, which means that it was owned first. It wasn't just given to the Levim straight, but it was given from ownership. And that ownership transferred from the Levim to the from the Yidden to the Levim, from the Bnei Yisrael. And that makes it such that it's not really, it's just Losheves, and that's what was given over to the tribe, but it wasn't given over to each individual. And now the Rebbe goes back to explain the original statement of the Medrash that the Rebbe asked, why are we telling you the way that it had four owners, Chavrin, how it passed all the different hands? Baba, Pikol now that when I verstehen dem Oiftu from Medrash Benegel Chavrin, we'll also understand what is the specialty that the Medrash says with regards to Chavrin. As Hoya'ila Bekarnasim Shel Dalit, that it went up in the lottery to four different Betchila Yehuda, first to Yehuda, V'achkach leKolev, then to Kolev. Yehuda was the tribe, but it went to Kolev, an individual. V'achkach leLevim, what the Rebbe explains. By Chavrin is nit nor gewen an Esina Klolis. Chavrin was more than just general given from Bnei Yisrael to Shevet Levi. That, like the rest of the other, over here, it didn't work the way it worked by all the Levim, by all the that the Yidden gave it to the tribe. Nor Chavrin is ongekommen zu Shevet Levi from Kolevim. The way it came to the tribe of Levi came from Kolevim. Das heißt, which means, noch dem Bisar Riber from Bailus Klolis, from Shevet Yehuda, after it has transferred from the general ownership from the tribe of Yehuda, they got it as a Shevet, so the Bailus Protis from Kolev. Now it transferred to the individual ownership of Kolev. Und das sagt der Medrash, as hoye oile bekornosin shel daled, that this went up in the lottery of 4, which means das haste, as in demselben Eufon, this is given the Bailus betchila, the Yehuda ulekoliv. In the same way that to beginning it was the ownership, it was to Yehuda, and from Yehuda came to Goliv. A Bailus proti, which means it was a personal ownership. Al derech ze is das abgegeben geworden zu the Levim. In a similar way, it's Dalet always same Levim, das heißt, as in Chevron have Levim oich abailus protis. That in Chevron they also have a individual ownership of their places, of their homes. Und wie bald as the Sichos from Orei HaLevim to the Levim, since the connection for the cities of the Levim is in an oifun fun, Gu'ulas Oilam, Kinalsi base, they're a stronger. Levim can always redeem. Kommt ois, so it turns out the Nitzchias from their Bailus from the Levim of Chevron, that the eternity of the ownership of the Levim of Chevron is mervi in alla andere chelkei Eretz Yisrael, is more than all the other portions. The portions that the Yidden owned and the portion that the Levies owned. Chevron is the most. Chevron is the most eternal. It has both. It has the benefit of Gulas Olam, which all the Levim properties have, all the cities, the Gulas Olam, but it also has the individual Bailus, which all the other Yidden have as individuals. And they're combined by the city of Hebron. That's why the Pasuk singles out the sale of Hebron and the Pirsa, because this is an eternal thing for all generation, that special connection to Hebron, the eternity of Hebron. Hebron is Mervi Lander Hebron. So Aleph. So the Nachla from Bnei Yisrael, if you want to compare it to the inherit of the Bnei Yisrael, was they told them they don't have the eternal redemption after the Ba'ari Chayma by Soda. It could get gone, so their connection is not so strong. But Beis Benegeya to andere Ore Halavim, even in comparison to the other cities which have a Gula Soilam, was Bazei told Bailus Protis. They don't have Bailus Protis, but in Hebron there's Bailus Protis. Hebron has both. It has the strongest connection, which all the Levim's cities had, but they were lacking in the sense that they didn't have individual ownership. Hebron had the individual ownership better, so he had the sort of the best of both, and that's why that is the city that is chosen and brought out in the Torah, especially Zion. The Bir Bazebi Pnimis Inyonim, to explain this in the inner matter of things. Der Tam Pnimi Farvos Ore Miklo Darfen Zayin Shel HaLevim. Here's the inner reason. Why do the Ore Miklo need to be cities of Levim? Is Al Derech Tamach Chinuch, the Il Sivdalet, similar to the reason of the Chinuch before Sivdalet. Weil das ist verbunden mit der Agone Vekapore von dem Heilig Nefesh Bishgoga. The city of the Levi, it's tied to the protection and the atonement of the one who killed accidentally, perhaps in the holier, in the land of the Levi. The Chet von Heilig Nefesh is a coffin. The sin of somebody who kills somebody is double. The Chet upirud, the sin makes a separation between the person and Hashem, and between the person who killed somebody. When the Rebbe is ein Kapore, therefore his atonement, durch the Ore Michlot, that's why it becomes through the cities of refuge, which are cities of the Levi. Was der Shem Levi is al Shem Yilove. She named him Levi, Hapam Yilove Ishi Eloi. Der Inyan from Kishur, That's the idea of to tie. You love it, my husband will tie, connect with me. From Kishur Chodosh, a new connection. Hapam you love it. She says, it will make a new connection of the chibur. Hepech inyan apirut, which is the opposite of separation. But this is in Yonim Shal Halavim. This is the idea. This is what Levim are to make connections. Aleph. Huvdel Labed es Hashem l'shorse. He has been separated to serve Hashem, to worship and serve Hashem. Un in Yonim is, and also their aspect is lahoiris drachov hayishorim u'mishpotim mishpotav hatzadikim l'rab, to teach the correct ways and the just judgments to the many. Mitzad chiburon mit neighbors, because they're connected with Hashem. Zei zainen chelkoi v'nachalosei. They are Hashem's portion, Hashem's inheritance. Hoyuldos, so they have a connection to Hashem. And this Roitzeach b'nevshugogo, he has the separation. So das poildos the tikun kapora v'tikun, that impacts the atonement and the correction of the mchetu pirut shemin odom lamokoim, for the Meirik Nefesh, the separation between the Yid and Hashem, from the one that killed, as a ver tzirich verbunden mit Neibersten. He becomes back connected to Hashem because the Levi is a connecting piece. He teaches, he makes connection. Based in the fact that they are Levi, they go along with the Kohanim and they serve the Kohanim. That expresses on the level of unity of Yid. If them was in them, in addition to the fact by teaching the correct ways, the just ways of Hashem to the many, which is teaching all Yidden how this drückt sich aus der Linie von Abbas Rabim Yisrael. So this also expresses the love of the loving Abbas Yisrael. Umitzad dem seinen Zeire Orim Atikune dem Chetu Pirut. And for that aspect, their cities become a correction on the sin and the separation between one person and the other. But in Heilig Nefesh, when you kill somebody, that is the level of Pirut. So the level that Yilavu Alecha V'Shar Sucha, they serve, and they serve for the Yidden, and they become like the agents. So that it brings the unity, and that corrects the other aspect of the Heilig Nefesh Bishgaga, the Pirut. Das is als das Aninim B'chol Orei Miklat. This is in all cities of refuge. In the Chevron is the Inyan Agdos mit noch Marat Gosha. But when it comes to Chevron, the idea of unity is with more emphasis. But dort design doch covered the Ovis via Moish or Kobnei Yisrael. Over there are buried the father and the mothers of all Yidden. When the river gain aroited Tfilas Adei Chevron, that's why prayers go up through Chevron. Und Tfilah wird angerufen Chevron. And why is prayer called Chevron? Mitzad its Chabrus, Hamidus, Chagas. Its combination is because of the union of the emotions of Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, and also the Kishur, B'chibur for Yid mit neighbors, to connect the Yidden with Hashem. But this is the Kapore of them Inyan from Ben Odom Lamokim Shebahirig Nefoshes. That is the atonement between a person and Hashem. That's the idea of that aspect of the Heilig Nefesh Bishgogo that connects with Hashem. That's the Chevron. Chevron is the connection. Chevron is the obvious in Moses. That's the Chevron. And the Tefillah, which unites benodam benodam chavere and also benodam mokem. The Baldas designing the obviously Mois from Klal Yisrael. Since they're the father and mother of all Yidden, is during the Chibur from the obviously Mois from Klal Yisrael biyachad. So through the connection of the father and the mothers together, so that brings also a unifying, the chevron which connects them. That also brings I guess they're connected also because they're all buried over there. And of all Yidnas, the bonim bonis v'chakum from say, the kapore of the mchetche berad nachavere, the atonement for the sin berad nachavere. But the inyan achibur, if I say feel, and that connection is to such an extent, that has come to golden bishmoy, that it comes openly. Chevron is connection, the name that we call it. In the Shema'ir Chevron, which is the language of Chibur. This is Sichos Simchas Torah, B'Shabbos Parshas Bereishis, Tovshin Lamed Zayin.